So I love trading, the thrill of trading. I love sport, used to play it, love watching it now. And I love the analytical side, pushing boundaries, discovering things that nobody has done before. So I wonder what job I should be doing. Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future. If you're interested in learning to trade successfully on sports, then why not visit the BetAngel Academy, where we have more detailed videos. So I had a meeting this week with somebody who came to see me, and one of the discussions we had was about my career. It wasn't mentioned in the interview that I did. Not much, I don't think. Can't remember. I'll find out in a week or two's time. But he was talking about work-life balance as well. And, you know, he was sort of trying to look at where I'd come from and where I was going and, you know, why I'd been successful and stuff like that. So it was interesting because I thought, well, actually, this would have made a great interview. So I thought I'd do a little piece to camera to sort of talk to you about how I see my position within the market, why I work the way that I do, and also about getting that difficult work-life balance sorted. Because for me, it's been a long career in terms of how I ended up at this particular point. I just didn't fluke into it or just turn up halfway through, you know, the Betfair trading business and suddenly start claiming to have it completely sussed. For me, it was working from the very low base and going to a much, much higher one. And that pretty much is the summary of my entire life. I've done the same in every role that I've done, and I will do in future roles that I adopt. My wife often says to me, you know, I don't think you'll ever retire because you'll always find something to do. And I think it's exactly the same. It won't necessarily be a monetary goal, it could be a social goal or something. I get the feeling that I want to be active until the day I die. I have no interest in having a comfortable retirement. I want to go off and keep achieving things, but what those things are, I have no idea at the moment. Who knows what will happen in the next 20 to 50 years or however long I choose to live. Sounds like I have a choice there. I don't. That's one of the interesting things about life, isn't it? But yeah, when I first started off, I had a low base to work from. My family didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and then my mum died. So things weren't looking particularly good at that particular moment in time. But I knew there was something inside me that just didn't want to settle for that. I wanted to go on and push to much higher levels. I remember just before my dad died, he sort of, you know, said to me for the first time ever, it's like, oh, I'm so proud of, you know, everything that you've managed to do. And I always knew that you'd do well. And it was like, well, why didn't you bloody tell me when I was young then? That would have been helpful. But of course, everything is easy in hindsight, isn't it? But when I got my first job, it was an absolutely nothing job. And really it was a stopgap to get me into another job. But one of the characteristics, or there were 2 characteristics that I always had. One is that I was always looking at things on the side. I was always really interested in if there were other things that I could do to supplement it, because I always had this burning desire to run my own business, to do my own thing, to work for myself. Always had that desire. And the other thing was that I always worked really hard. So when I got my first really, really big break, I remember going to the interview and thinking, I really must get this job because I'm going to do such a great job at it that they will end up paying me more. And it's funny how your attitude changes over life, because one of the life lessons that I've learned is that it's more important to pursue something that makes you happy, that you feel that you're achieving something, rather than just the money. I'll come on to that in a second, because the problem is money leaves you soulless if that is your ultimate pursuit. It's better that you're looking at the goal from a different perspective. So trading for me was all about A, discovering it, B, being the first person to do it, and then C, doing something really, really special with it. So being just a trader is not good enough for me. I want to be the best that there ever has been and do it on a scale and a level that nobody will probably ever be able to do again, based upon my starting point. So it's been about pushing the boundaries for me. That's what I'm all about. I would still do it if I made no money at all. The fact that I make money is a bonus. But it's all about the voyage of discovery. You know, one of the best things for me is when somebody says, that can't be done, or this is wrong, or that's wrong, and you can turn around and say, well, you know what, actually you're wrong, because that can be done, and I am doing it. And I realize that, you know, everybody is at a different level, But for me, it's all about pushing the boundaries, making discoveries, learning new things. And just, it's taught me so much about so many things and about myself as well, that actually it's been a much deeper journey than just a few numbers on a screen. And I want to take some of that knowledge forward in whatever role I do after this. And I want to use that to help other people as well. That's one of the things that I've enjoyed, is that for me, it's all about the journey and some of the unachievable goals that I've achieved. And I think I've learnt in myself that there's much more within people if they're given the opportunity. But yeah, when I landed my first big sort of job, I remember accepting it on a relatively low wage, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to work as hard as I can, and then we'll see how things work out. And it was one of the most enjoyable roles I've ever had, and I worked really hard, and I did get paid more money, but something interesting happened, and that was that other people then started to recruit me to do jobs elsewhere, which I hadn't really thought about as being a goal. But yeah, gradually being able to move up the career ladder was an interesting aspect of my early part of my career. And from that interview that I did that got me that sort of decent role that sort of spawned a bit of international travel and a few other things, all of a sudden I never was interviewed again. And it was always the case of people would approach me and ask me to go and work for them. And it was just because I put my heart and soul into the job. And that was the most important thing, was to try and do a good job. And the thing you learn about that as well is you can only do a good job if you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, change roles. Because as I progressed up the career ladder, one of the funny things, well, I say funny, it wasn't funny, that happened to me was suddenly I ended up getting into roles that I didn't particularly enjoy, and it was beginning to get soulless. Yes, I was getting paid well. I was doing, one of the things on my bucket list, which was, traveling a lot and visiting interesting people and going to new places. But it was getting a bit repetitive. It was like, what did we do last year? Well, I need that again this year, plus 20%. And it's like, well, I don't feel socially, morally, or spiritually I'm sort of achieving anything from this. It's just numbers on a spreadsheet, and it's just not happening for me. So as a consequence, my enthusiasm began to die, and as a consequence I started to do not as good a job as I had done previously. And I began to realize that in fact, probably I was going down the wrong path at that particular moment in time. It was a great job, it was well paid, but I just didn't enjoy it, and I couldn't see what was next. In my current role, I just see opportunity everywhere, and not necessarily just in this market, but just like, I've learned so much. But I was finding in the corporate world things were soulless, and you were out of control of your own destiny as well. Even if you were really good at what you could do, somebody could make a decision in the hierarchy that would negatively influence you, and then that was it. That was thrown out, and I was getting hacked off with that as well. So I realised that I had to break out of that, and I was looking for these opportunities to come along. It just happened that, trading was one of the opportunities that came along that got me out of that particular role. But I'll tell you what the breaking point was, and here's a great bit of work-life balance for you. First daughter was born, and I get a call from the company I'm working for telling me to come in for a line managers meeting, and it's like, are you kidding me? My wife's just given birth, I've got a tiny baby here, and you're asking me to come in for a meeting? It's like, I'm sure you can survive without me for this meeting. But they had a new MD, and he was insistent that I did turn up to the meeting. And what did I do? Well, I did turn up to the meeting. And you're thinking, you fool, Peter, you should have stayed at home with your family. No, I did something better than that. I picked up my daughter, who was only a few days old, can't remember how many days old she was, and I took her to the meeting with a bottle of milk as well. So went into the office, microwaved the milk, took her into the office, fed her, and then changed her nappy in the middle of the meeting. It was a beautiful moment in my life. And when I left that meeting, everybody stood up in the office and gave me a round of applause, because I basically just stuck two fingers up at the management. And they obviously felt fairly aggrieved with the way they were being treated as well. So yeah, it didn't last for much longer at that job. But it was an important moment for me, because you realise that there are some things in life that aren't worth sacrificing. And being able to see your children grow up is one of them. So I've been very proud over the best part of 20 years now that my children have seen me go right through this journey. And we have a happy home life. And it's ironic really, because when the twins were born, we were still in a small house. And the problem that we had was we didn't have enough room in the house for somewhere for me to work, for me to trade from. So what did I do? We converted half the garage into an office, and I worked in the garage basically, was for the first part of my trading career. And I may have some pictures somewhere. I'll have to see if I can bring them up for you. But yeah, that was my first trading desk, was in the garage basically. I did a job of raising the floor and putting some insulation in and stuff so it didn't get too cold in the winter. But yeah, it was that was pretty much where I kicked off my trading career. But within a few years, I'd done well enough to be able to buy our next house, and we'd moved to a bigger house with a proper study, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it was a really interesting moment for me in life, because I'd always worked really hard at everything that I'd done. But that's because I think that's important. But you can't really work hard unless if you enjoy it. So I think enjoyment first allows you to do a good job, and then the money follows thereafter. If you're not enjoying it, you won't do a good job, and therefore you won't get paid the money effectively. So it's really important, I think, to be able to get that in your head as well. What is your long-term goal? You know, one of the things I wanted to do with trading, which I've been able to do, is you can pretty much trade from wherever you want nowadays. You couldn't when I first started, but you can nowadays. So in recent years, I've been trading from many different locations. But I generally, you know, I've done a few videos of places that I've been to, but generally I don't talk about it too much, because when you, I'm keen not to sell that as, you know, the trader's lifestyle, as it were, because everybody's different. I had to start working in a garage, and I worked furiously hard to get myself to first base, where I could start to feel a bit more comfortable with myself and with, you know, having the family sorted and stuff like that, which is obviously critical. So I think that, you know, I've never really tried to push the lifestyle as something for you to aspire to, because everybody's at a different stage of that, and maybe you don't want to do that. One of the great things that trading has done for me is I've been able to spend all this time with my family, which I would not have been able to do in my previous corporate life. I was really well paid, but the hours were extraordinary and quite stressful, and, you know, I didn't know where I was going to be at any one point. And yet in the last 20 years I've been able to go to the kids' plays, sports days and all of that stuff, and see them go through that experience. But as you will know, I do work hard, but, you know, unbelievably, that is my job. Trading is a competitive industry, and also it just happens that all of the key events peak on a Saturday. So it would be great if I didn't have to work Saturdays, but the fact is I realised very quickly, within about 6 months or so of starting this, that that was the key day of the week. If you got a Saturday right, the week was sorted. And if you skipped Saturday, you were missing out on probably 80% of the opportunity. So, you know, you have to work hard. If you want to be the best, and you want to push the very boundaries of what you do, and you want to be an expert, you have to put the hours in. Can you imagine a footballer qualifying for the World Cup final or the European Champions League and then going, oh no, it's on a Saturday evening, and I always go out with a pint with my mates on a Saturday evening? No, you can't. That's their job. This is my job. That's why I work hard at it. But also it's the desire to push the limits of what's possible. When I finish my career, I want to be known as the person that A, discovered it first, B, did something about it, and C, pushed it to levels that are seemingly unbelievable. And that's, you know, one of the things that I want to achieve. You know, describing the markets in such beautiful detail that it's indisputable that, you know, the amount of knowledge that I've acquired. But it's interesting because trading's taught me a lot, and I think you know, I'll be prepared to take that into other roles. And, you know, it's taught me a lot about myself, about the way that people work and the way that markets work, and I think that's transplantable into other things. So it may not be a money-oriented goal that I end up with. It may be a more socially oriented goal or something when I decide to not do this any longer. But I have to say, I've, you know, not, I've got no plans to sort of give up. I'm going through a bit of a renaissance. I may do a video on that at some point in the future, and talk to you about that, because it's funny, because I've actually got another spurt of activity over the last year or two, which I hadn't expected. But I think if you're looking at things in balance, and, you know, if you try and encapsulate what I've said in the last sort of 15 minutes, in terms of a general philosophy that you should apply to your trading and to life and everything, I think probably one of the best things you can say is when you wake up in the morning, it's like, if I knew I was going to die tomorrow, what would I change about today? And the reason that I say that is because you can change your general motivation. So it's like if somebody is being a complete idiot in your current job, I would, if I was going to die tomorrow, I would go up to that idiot and say to him, you know what, you're a total idiot, and this is why. That's how I would change my life if I went back to the earlier part of my career, because it never really did any harm to me. It just allowed me to continue to progress along the correct path. But also, you know, over the years, I've gradually gone down the bucket list ticking off items. One of the best moments in my life over the last 5 years was watched a documentary when I was very young, where this guy did this 3-day trek and then ended up on the top of this mountain, and I did the same. And it was one of the best moments of my life, was standing there and thinking, wow, you know, I've done this. I can't believe it. From when I watched this when I was very young to actually being able to stand here, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. It's very difficult to describe the feeling you get when you do that. So you can see that that was a completely different goal. However, it was trading that allowed me to get there. So, you know, have these goals off in the distance, and you're going to follow a meandering path to get to them. But you need to have some core philosophy in terms of where you want to be and why you want to be there. So for me, I always wanted children. It was important that they were brought up the right way. I wanted to be there, and that was one of the reasons that I jumped out of the existing corporate culture. But on the same side, in order to be able to do that, you have to, you know, trade off a couple of things. Like, I always work Saturdays and very rarely have Saturdays off, but that's because that gives me the means to do all of those other things and to slot all those pieces together. So I think that, you know, if you have a philosophy that you want to follow that philosophy. It's like, you know, if I died tomorrow, what would I regret, or what would I change? How would that change my approach to the following? Because, you know, everybody has goals to achieve, and there are a number of ways of achieving it. I'm not going to sell you on one particular aspect of it or another, or on what I've achieved, because I think that the level that I've reached is probably not going to be repeated. So I wouldn't say to you, yes, you can achieve all of these wonderful things. So, you know, have sensible goals, but achievable ones, and then live your life by them. What's important to you? Are there certain things that you really, really want to do? Because start working towards them. Start doing things that push you in that direction. When somebody asks you to do something, or you're facing a difficult decision, you sort of think back to that goal that you set a long time ago, and you have to say, well, does this get me nearer to that goal or further away? And that's how you answer yes or no to questions. Is it related to your family life? Do you want a nice, stable family? If I'd reached this point and didn't have a stable family life and hadn't been able to buy a house and all of those sort of things, I would feel that perhaps I hadn't done the right thing. But the fact is I have, and I've been able to do a load of other things behind there as well. And that's been a result of the trading. So that's why I put a lot of energy and effort into it, because that drives me on. But where I'm at now with this is that it's a voyage of discovery for me. The monetary side didn't become an issue a long time ago, so I'm just constantly pushing to try and find where the limits of the market are, where things are going to go from here. You know, now that the US is open, is that going to open up a new opportunity? Those are the sort of things that get me excited when I wake up in the morning thinking about what I could achieve from there. But it's not to the detriment of other stuff that I want to achieve as well. And I think it's important to put that into perspective. So anyhow, a little bit of a ramble. It's triggered off by a conversation that I had earlier this week, and I thought it would be interesting to do a piece to camera just to talk you through my philosophy and journey, to hopefully give you a bit of a better direction, because that's one of the things that I'm quite keen to do as I progress onwards, is to be able to pass on some of that knowledge and experience to give people direction that are coming up. I'm doing it for my children now, and like I've said in previous videos, when I look at the camera I think that I'm talking to my children, and what would I say to them? So anyhow, I hope that's been of some use to you, and a bit of a ramble, but just sort of came right from here based upon the conversation I had about how did I get here and how did I balance everything else out with that. But I think it's important to have those goals and to strive towards those, even though it may not be a directly perfect path. It's more important that you have some sort of underlying philosophy and you live and die by it. So yeah, when you wake up tomorrow morning, think, you know, if I was going to die tomorrow, what would I change?